Gray is here on the Blaze Radio Network.
Great to have you with us. Oh, wait. How did
Good morning, American.
Jeez.
Whoa.
Wow.
It's Friday.
I mean, the most important part of the day right there.
Wow.
Most important part of the week.
Could have thrown us right into a tailspin.
Yeah, would have
Yeah.
messed up the entire show.
Sure would have. Thank heaven. All right. Today is one of our Freaky Friday shows where we go over some fabulous conspiracy theory for you and just kind of kick it around, let you decide for yourself. And today we're up to the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, which was mysterious from the very beginning, if you remember. And we are joined by aviation journalist Jeff Wise. Jeff, welcome to the Blaze. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We first became aware of your stuff with the Netflix documentary on MH370. Fascinating stuff. I mean, walk us through. First of all, I guess what the mainstream explanation is that happened to MH370.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about MH370, if you look at it from a conspiracy theory perspective, one of the main, necessary things you have to have for a conspiracy theory is a sort of a default narrative. Like, what is the conventional view?
Right.
JFK, who shot JFK? Well, there is a official report on who did it, and a sort of a common understanding. With MH370, there actually is no official explanation. When the Australian authorities released their final report on the matter, they didn't say what they thought happened.
Right. Neither did Malaysia.
They have various evidence. They tried to interpret it. There is kind of a common understanding, but it's never been sort of officially put forward. And sort of to answer your question belatedly, the sort of default assumption is that the pilot, a guy named Zahari Ahmed Shah, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, but just decided to commit this very elaborate and prolonged murder-suicide and kill all of his passengers and crew.
Yeah.
Very long way.
Weird.
So it's a very strange idea. Even the main sort of, consensus view is itself strange. Oftentimes when you think about conspiracy theories, you think about sort of the wackadoodle, out there fringe ideas, and then the sort of normal, conventional view.
Right.
Here, there really is no normal, conventional story. And once you get into the details, once you understand the sort of technical aspects of the evidence, what it implies about how this case transpired, even the sort of what people call the normal view is itself has a lot of very strange aspects.
Sure. Did Malaysia ever say a final report when they pulled the plug on the investigation for the? I mean, they finally came out, 2 or 3 years or 4 years later, and said, "We're done, right? We're not going to search anymore. It's over."
Yeah, the Australians and the Malaysians each issued a report, and they were similar. I mean, they had a lot of overlapping information.
Okay.
There wasn't really a lot of disagreement between the two, but I think the Malaysians were more inclined to say that the pilot didn't do it. I mean, the Malaysians don't want the pilot to have done it.
Right.
And so their report, I think, emphasized the fact that this guy had no motive. There was no sign that, he didn't leave any notes, or he wasn't any kind of extremist or deranged or anything like that. Yeah.
So you've been an analyst for Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. You eventually wrote a book about this topic, which we'll talk about later on. What initially got you involved in researching this so much?
So I got my pilot's license in 2002, and as one does, I became very interested in reading accident reports. And you want to not have happen to you what happened to other people. You want to stay alive. And then, being a journalist, being a freelancer, I'm like, okay, how can I somehow make a living off of this stuff? So I would, when planes would crash and things would happen, I would write about them. And there was a case in 2009 that was absolutely fascinating called Air France 447. A plane took off from Rio de Janeiro. It was a red-eye flight to Paris, and it just vanished over the sort of the middle of the Atlantic Ocean near the equator. And it was really a sort of precursor in a way to MH370. It had a lot of similar characteristics in the sense that it was the middle of the night. No one really knew where it was. Nobody was really paying attention. It wasn't until the morning time when people, air traffic controllers in Africa said, wait a minute, where is this thing? And they found some electronic clues that had been transmitted from the plane and that allowed them to ultimately find it. But it was a big undertaking. It required a seabed search in very deep ocean, much like MH370. That happened in 2009. It wasn't until 2011 that the case was solved. But I wrote about that, and that an absolutely fascinating case. But I think that sort of put me on some radar screens of people. And so when MH370 disappeared, as you, I'm sure, will recall, it was a subject of widespread fascination around the world and sort of dominated CNN coverage for like several months, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Just as a reminder, because, it's been since, March of 2014 that this happened. Tell us from where it took off and then when it went missing.
So it took off from Kuala Lumpur shortly after midnight. March 8th, 2014, coming up on 10 years now. Wow. It was heading for Beijing. It was a red-eye flight, 239 passengers and crew aboard. It took off to the northwest. It turned. It was heading to the northeast towards China. It left the Malaysian airspace, heading towards the next air traffic control zone was Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And so as it was in between the airspace of Malaysia and Vietnam, 6 seconds after it passed the last waypoint in Malaysia, it went electronically dark. So it vanished from air traffic control screens at a time when nobody was looking at it. Nobody was officially in charge of this plane. Nobody was looking. Nobody noticed. And so sometime later, eventually the Vietnamese air traffic controllers were like,
hey, where are you at?
Weren't we supposed to see this plane? Wasn't this plane supposed to be here? I seem to recall. And so they started calling and telephoning, and the person in charge of the Malaysian air traffic control station at that point was asleep. It was literally like taking a nap.
Oh man.
Yeah, so everything unfolded from there. But it was like sort of this when planes disappear, oftentimes it just takes a little while for people to realize, oh, wait a minute, something really weird is happening. People don't expect this sort of black swan event to transpire. They expect things to be normal, and it takes people a little while to change their headspace.
Is that typical of every flight, where somebody's just not paying attention to where you are at a given point, where it's maybe out of somebody's jurisdiction and not into somebody else's? Is that typical?
There is every time so any long flight, like a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, or from anywhere to anywhere else, you're going to pass through zones of air traffic control. Mm-hmm. And as you're handed from one person to the next, there's a handover period. So you say goodbye to one guy, and they say contact the next controller on frequency such and such. And there is a couple of minutes that you have to do that. And during that time, nobody's really paying attention to you. Now, it depends on, if it's the middle of the day, people are awake, people are alert. There's there's many people staffing,
not napping, that kind of thing.
They're not napping. It's not strange things happen at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So in the case of Air France 447, there's a huge area over the middle of the Atlantic where you're just not really in contact with anybody. Now, I should point out, all of this is changing really quickly. Like, technology is evolving fast. We're seeing more and more satellite communications. There's more and more coverage, and so forth. So things that happened in 2009 or 2014 might not be true today. But in the context of that time, this was the situation.
I'm kind of stunned that in 2014 it could happen. Because we have pretty impressive technology. I remember watching was it Denzel Washington, or was it, it was Will Smith, I think. Enemy of the State, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
And they talk about satellite coverage of the planet, and there was nowhere he could go without the government seeing where he was at all times. And we've been told a million times, we've got satellites that can read the license plate on your car at 60 miles an hour. Well, okay, then how did we lose a plane? How is that possible?
That's a great question. And being able to read the license plate on a car is different from being able to track every car over a really wide area. And this is like a whole nother subject. There are people who spend a lot of time thinking and talking about this kind of stuff, sort of wide area surveillance.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you look at the license plate on a car, you know what your target is. You're looking at it. You're looking at the world through a straw, right? But if you're talking about like all the planes in the world, then there's like tens of thousands of planes airborne at any one time. It becomes a question of like it's needle in a haystack. Like if you're looking at a haystack and you don't know which straw actually is of interest. And so there are satellites taking pictures of the Earth all the time. But is that data being kept? Is that data being processed? It turns out that there are gaps. You know, one of the things that became of interest after MH370 disappeared and we didn't know where it went, it could have gone, and we can sort of talk about this in a more linear way if you want, but when people were concerned about where did this plane go, there was a lot of talk about, well, did anybody see it on their radar?
Yeah.
And it turned out that the Malaysian military saw it on their radar. The two neighboring countries, Thailand and Indonesia, either didn't see it or saw it and wouldn't say. We just don't know. And did it go over India? Maybe. Were they looking? What was happening in the middle of the night? We don't. People assume that because you can read the license plate on a car, that everyone's looking everywhere all the time, and that's probably not true. People probably look at specific things at specific times because it's expensive and manpower intensive and money intensive just look. You know?
Yeah. So if you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But if you don't, then it's going to be a little bit tougher. Now, didn't this somewhere in the I don't remember how many hours into the flight, but at some point it changed course unexpectedly, right?
Well, this is it exactly. So as we said, okay, so it's flying along. It's everything's completely normal. 40 minutes into the flight, it's shortly after 1 a.m. local time. And it goes dark. It vanishes from screen, but nobody's paying any attention. Immediately, the plane does a hard left bank. And so it does a U-turn. And it's not entirely clear. The data is a little bit fuzzy, but it seems like it probably accelerated and maybe even climbed. So it's not slowing down. It's not behaving like a plane that's in fire or having some kind of problem. It's not like descending to try to land on the nearest possible airport. It's accelerating and climbing. It's flying along the Malaysia-Thai border, going back over the Malay Peninsula where it came from, actually flies over Malaysian Air Force Base, and then turns again near the island of Penang and flies right up the middle of the Malacca Strait. So it's heading to the northwest. And it's kind of going in between Thai and Indonesian airspace, sticking in the Malaysian part of this water body. And it flies for another 40 minutes. And so as it's doing this, the reason that we know that this happened is because, as I mentioned, the Malaysian military was watching it on their radar. Right. Now, was a human being watching this? Probably not. It's the middle of the night. Malaysia's not at war with anybody. There's no like heightened tensions with anybody. How many people are actually sitting at a screen watching nothing happen night after night? Maybe nobody. Maybe they're just the radar is on, but it's just getting recorded. We don't really, so it's not until the next week that the Malaysians admit that, oh yeah, we actually have a recording of this thing going up the Malacca Strait. And then the next thing that happens is that it leaves, so this kind of military radar, what's called primary radar, it works by you're shooting out a beam of microwave energy. It's like a flashlight, basically. It's like an invisible flashlight. And, you can only see so far with a flashlight. And radar also has a limited range. And so you've got multiple radars that are covering this area. You can see it going from one area to the next. And then you go beyond the range of the last radar and it disappears.
Jeff... Man,
and then it disappears again. So by this point, the plane has actually disappeared twice, right? It's disappeared off the air traffic control screens, and now it's disappeared again off the military radar.
I mean, this is fascinating. And the prevailing theory that the pilot, it was just an elaborate way to commit suicide and take everyone down with him. I mean, I don't want to get into the mind of the pilot here, but it seems like if you would do that, you're over the ocean, you're headed northeast, you're not quite to China yet. Just go ahead and do it there. It's the doubling back and then the going off to the northwest when your original route was northeast, which makes this so strange. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. Early on in your investigation, were you on board with the theory that it was the pilot? And if that's true, what took you off of that?
That's a great question. One thing I would point out that I think is important and overlooked, which is that the goal of an accident investigation is not to find an answer per se. It's to explore what might have happened. And if you can exclude everything except for one, then that's great. But at this point, we can't. I think that it's sort of a natural human tendency to want an answer.
Yeah.
To find out, okay, I want a theory. I want to cling to this theory. I want to hold on to this theory. I want to believe. I want to believe. It's human nature. But from a scientific perspective, that is actually very unhelpful. What we want to do as much as possible is not come to a conclusion, but to think about what are the possibilities? What is the data? What stories can we tell that comport with that data until we can definitively rule it out? And there's some things that are just so unlikely that you have to kind of put them on the shelf because it's too much work to have to keep everything up in here. But so the pilot theory very early on, was a leading candidate, and it remains a leading candidate. But there's problems with it. And I forget the second part of your question because I went on a little rant.
No, that's fine. I was saying, if you were on board with the pilot theory, what took you off of that? But talk about this pilot and why
people don't believe necessarily that he did this.
So we've talked about some of the strange aspects of this diversion, like this. It seems, like I said, it was 6 seconds after passing over the last waypoint in Malaysian airspace, at which point you could safely assume you've said goodbye, you've left their airspace, you're officially not their problem. It's the middle of the night. It's a safe bet that whatever you do at this point, no one's going to notice. And then he does this hard 180 and flies back the other way, makes these turns. It's behaving in a certain way that implies that whoever's in control of this aircraft knows what he or she is doing and is, capable and skilled at operating aircraft, talking with ATC, etc. It's a sophisticated action. It's not a burning plane. It's not a plane with that's in a state of emergency. It's a plane that seems to be acting with intent and aggressive intent, I would say. The turn back was so hard that it couldn't be done on regular autopilot. Like you had to physically grab the wheel and turn it.
Wow.
So this is strange behavior. And as you said, if you just wanted to kill yourself, there are cases of pilots who kill themselves and their passengers and crew. They usually do it by just pushing the nose down and flying straight into the ground. Get it over with. There was actually a case the year after MH370, a guy with mental problems who, on his iPad after he died, they found him. He had been searched and was reading about MH370 because of theories about the pilot. And so he did it by he locked he was the co-pilot. He locked the captain out of the cockpit when he went for a pee break, and he just set the autopilot for 0 altitude.
Wow.
As he was flying over the Alps. So he flew down into the Alps. So, but he didn't wait 6 hours. He didn't set the autopilot and then wait for 6 hours to run out of fuel. He did it more or less quickly. So you have someone who has got a very complicated plan, is executing it aggressively, but is also super patient or just wants to draw it out as much as possible. So that's all strange. Then something even stranger happens, and this is where I sort of started to peel away, which is that so the plane has left Malaysian radar. It's heading to the northwest. It then turns to the north.
Right.
Okay, it turns to the north, and a blip appears on radar as it's sort of if you can imagine a plane flying away from you, you're the radar and you're seeing it. It's a small cross section. But even imagine the plane turns and it's sort of now it's angled to you and you can kind of see its wings a little bit. So it sort of presents a larger radar signature. So the plane briefly reappears on the radar and then vanishes again. 3 minutes after this, something very strange happens, and this event is something that I consider kind of like the core of the mystery, and I'm somewhat alone in that. Not other people tend to minimize or not even really talk about this thing that happened. But what happened was a piece of equipment on board the plane called the satellite data unit that had been turned off gets turned back on.
Oh.
And as a result of this box getting turned back on, the plane is now automatically reconnecting to a satellite communications network run by a company called Inmarsat. And over the course of the next 6 hours, this plane is going to send periodic transmissions automatically. No one's using it. It's almost like if you turn on your cell phone when you come out of the movie theater, say, now the phone is on, it connects to the towers around you, and it says to those towers, hey, this phone is on the network. If somebody calls, it's here.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sending any data. But then you can send a text if you want. You can make a call if you want. But the network just knows you're there. So this is called metadata, where it's like you're not sending information per se, but you're just letting the network know that you're there. And the network is recording certain aspects of this signal just so it's sort of a housekeeping operation. It needs to know what frequency you're at and certain other things. So the system reconnects. It's not used by somebody on board the plane. But what happens is a little bit later, Malaysian Airlines is like, where the hell is our plane? This is some hours after it's gone missing,
Right.
but they're finally starting to grok that something untoward is happening. So they make 2 phone calls. And when they call, the phone gets patched into the onboard telephone system and rings. Nobody answers. And they hang up. But because of that, we now have more metadata that's being sent from the plane. Anyway,
So we know where it is.
we wind up having 7 pings on a more or less hourly basis. And there's no data. Now, there's a lot of aspects of this case that are just coincidental or they either happen to occur or maybe somebody wanted them to be like this. But one of the aspects of this case is that Malaysian Airlines at this time was kind of in financial straits. It was not particularly well run, and it had been sort of skirting bankruptcy for a while. And so they were sort of doing things on the cheap. And as one result of this is that their subscription with their satellite communications provider was like the lowest. There's different, like there's premium and there's like none.
Of course, they're the lowest.
Mm-hmm.
If they had been paying for the higher version, it would have come with automatic GPS embedded in the metadata. So you would have had like a latitude, longitude of where this plane at every time. But because they weren't paying that, it was just like this signal that just said the plane is here, but you don't know where.
Yeah, but doesn't the company have that information? Even if Malaysian Air doesn't?
No, they would have gotten it through that company, right?
You can imagine a situation where the company has that information, but they're not giving it.
Right.
That wasn't the case.
Okay.
They weren't even recording it.
Okay.
And here's a funny case, a funny aspect of this case. I'd mentioned earlier Air France 447 disappearing in 2009. When Air France 447 disappeared, scientists at Inmarsat thought, you know what? There is some metadata that if a plane went missing in the future and we had it, it would help us locate that plane.
Right.
So they started to record this data because of Air France 447. Yeah. And that data happened to be used to help locate MH370. Awesome. This aspect of the metadata. And so so in a way, Air France 447 was the model. I said it was a precursor of MH370. It really was similar in a way, and like you might even wonder if, in some sense, it was kind of a model, like an inspiration for MH370.
Mm-hmm. So we know it's still up, right, at this point. And how many hours are we into the flight here when all of this is going on?
It's like an hour and a half. When the SDU gets turned back on, right?
And the flight to Beijing takes how long normally?
It normally takes like 6 hours.
Okay. So, was anybody alarmed yet?
Yeah, there's plenty of fuel. There's no real concern because it's
obviously
flying.
It's still in the air at this point. So there wasn't anybody that was super alarmed yet. Is that right? Or were they starting to become alarmed?
By this point, I think the penny was starting to drop.
Right.
It was like this plane should have definitely checked in with Ho Chi
somebody
Minh.
should have answered the phone.
Yeah.
But they haven't. But they haven't yet. They're like, my teenager isn't home and it's 2 a.m. It could be bad or it might not be bad.
Right.
I don't know how bad it is. It's not good, but I don't know how bad it is. It could be really bad or it could be not that bad.
Now, I got a quick question for you. I seem to recall something from the documentary, and correct me if my memory is wrong here, Jeff. The satellite data that shows you the location of the plane, I guess rough location, it was. I should have gone back and watched it, but it's not always reliable, right? It could be another place entirely, right?
So it gets a little bit complicated, but basically there's two kinds of data that they got from these satellite transmissions. And it wasn't until much, much later that they were able to kind of do the math and sort of work out what it all meant.
Okay.
So this wasn't really relevant at the time of the disappearance.
Okay.
But in the following weeks, they were like, okay, there's two kinds of data. One kind is pretty easy to understand. One is a little bit more complex. The first kind is called the burst timing offset, BTO. It's timing data. Basically, it's a measurement of how long it takes when the satellite sends a signal to the plane, how long it takes for the plane to respond. And that basically tells you, because the speed of light is fixed, it tells you how far away the plane is. This is the data that they only started to record after Air France 447, and nobody outside of Inmarsat knew that they were doing this. And so if somebody was trying to fool Inmarsat, they probably wouldn't know that this data was even going to be available. Anyway. This data tells you how far the plane is, and so it lets you kind of make these rings. You might have heard about the ping rings or the arcs, and so it basically limits the range of possibilities of where this plane could be. And so the first ping, sure enough, was really close to the last radar contact, and the geometry of the ping tells you that the plane by that point had turned north. Then in subsequent pings, you can actually use those arcs to work out with a fair degree of precision a path that the plane would have taken to match those arcs. But there's a twist, which is that because these arcs are symmetrical, there's two possibilities. For each arc, it could have gone left or right. And so if it went left, it went south. It went down into the southern Indian Ocean. And if it went right, it went up through India, up over the Himalayas and into Central Asia. So those are the two. That's what you know just from the first set of data. Now the second set of data is called the burst frequency offset, and it gets very, very complicated. But the upshot is that if you do fancy math and kind of squint and look at it sideways, it tells you which of those paths is correct. And it took Inmarsat a while. So for about a week, it was like we knew it went either north or south, but we didn't know which. And if it went north, then that's probably like a hijacking. Somebody wanted to steal the plane and take it somewhere, and it could be on the ground somewhere. These passengers could be alive. Mm-hmm. If it went south, it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's been like a week already. They're dead for sure. But then that's what had turned out. It turned out that the frequency data said that the plane went south. So with these two pieces of data, you have two. The first piece of data tells you that the plane went either this way or that way, and then the second data tells you which of those is correct. You asked me where I peeled. So by this point, we're like, okay, we've got all this data. It tells us that the plane went south. It could only really be the pilot. The pilot must have been because whoever wanted to do this it was a suicide mission.
Right.
And since the plane, so you have someone very calmly saying good night, Malaysia, Mace 370, and then the plane, very soon after turns and disappears. There's no way that somebody could plausibly break down the cockpit door, get in there, wrestle, control the airplane and everything, and without any transmissions, it seems very unlikely. So if the plane went into the southern Indian Ocean, it seems hard to imagine any other perpetrator than the pilot. Right.
Okay. We're talking to Jeff Wise, aviation journalist, who's got a book on this, got a podcast coming up. We'll tell you more about this and get into some of the other murky waters surrounding this flight. Coming up in just a minute. last Friday of the month, so we are tackling another bizarre situation, and that's Malaysian Flight 370. Now, this one, I mean, it's bizarre because they literally don't know what happened here.
Right.
Really, they don't know what happened. So, yeah, of course there's going to be some speculation. In fact, the speculation was, and I don't know how long after the incident Don Lemon said this, but he actually asked if it was possible that they flew into a black hole.
I mean, it's a question you have to ask.
He was just reading a tweet on the air.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and then,
and he just threw it out to his guest.
Yes,
Is that
yeah.
possible that it flew into a black hole? Don, I don't think so, but maybe that's just
Were
me.
you the guest?
No, I was not the
Okay.
guest.
I think the way she said it is,
I'm no expert.
if it was
but-
a black hole, our entire universe would have just been sucked, not just the plane.
Right. Yeah, just a really super tiny black hole that they just happened to run into.
Wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep. So we've got aviation journalist and Malaysian Flight 370 expert Jeff Wise on. Jeff was part of the Netflix documentary on this subject, and he's got all kinds of knowledge on this and has done incredible research.
Yeah, new podcast, too.
And a new podcast coming in September, right?
Yeah, in September. I think, correct us if we're wrong here, Jeff. The pilot is already available. It's called Deep Dive MH370.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for mentioning
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Also, so okay, we've established that this flight left from Kuala Lumpur. It was on the way to Beijing. It took some weird turns. I mean, it did a hard left turn. That doesn't happen on autopilot. So the pilot did it on purpose. Is it possible then? I mean, it kind of opens up the hijacking
Yes,
theory
it does.
a little bit, doesn't it?
Okay, that's a great question, but I have to go back. I was on air with Don Lemon
Okay.
when he said that thing
Oh,
about the
nice.
black
You
hole.
were. How about
I was
that?
in
That's
the, there was
amazing.
like a 6 box up.
Yeah. And
I did a lot of CNN work at that time about MH370. So I was there, and I need to say he said that as a joke. He was like,
Okay.
"Oh, because people were already starting to talk about crazy theories," and he's like, "What is it? Like a black hole or a UFO or I don't even know it was Don or like one of the other
It
guests."
was a
but
tweet
people
that
are
came
sort
in,
of saying like, you know. There's so many crazy theories. Like, what is it? Like, did a dinosaur from the moon eat it or something? And so, but you can't be ironic or sarcastic. People will take you
Seriously,
literally,
yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter what. And he got really tsunamied by that. And this is like Don Lemon obviously had like many other problems later. But that was
that's
one of
very
the
true.
first. Because Don was just that story made Don Lemon like that turned him into kind of a star at CNN.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
but I was on with him a lot. Anyway,
So-
that's not your question. Sorry, I just had to say that.
All right.
So you're saying like, okay, all these strange things happen. This plane is taken off to the northwest, and it's very strange. Did the pilot do it? Is there some way that somebody else could have done it? And the original question was, how did I peel off from the idea that the pilot must have done it? And so the really weird thing for me is like, how did this box get turned back on? Because there is not an on-off switch for this box. And so after this happened, I asked a lot of 777 pilots. I said, "How do you reboot the SDU?" And they all said to me, "The what?" The pilots don't know what an SDU is. It's not something that they need to know. And frankly, the aircraft manufacturers don't want pilots to be messing around with the electronics. It turns out that there's only two ways that you can turn it off and turn it back on again. The simplest way is to go back out of the cockpit into the first class cabin. There's a piece of carpet that you lift it. Underneath the carpet, there's an unlocked hatch. You
Everybody
go down
knows
into the
this.
hatch.
I mean,
It's
this is just
electronic.
embarrassing now.
And so you go down there, and there's like circuit breakers and stuff, and there's the computers that actually run the plane, and you can flip those circuit breakers. Or the second way to turn the box off and back on again is you can do a complicated series of things. You basically isolate half of the plane's electronic equipment, and the box is part of that set of equipment. Both really complicated ways. Both things that pilots are trained not to do either of these things.
Right.
And so the question becomes like, wait a minute, this is when it gets very strange. How do we account for the fact that it's one thing to take a plane and kill yourself and everyone on board, but why are you messing around with the electrical configuration?
Right.
So the question I said to myself was, okay, we've used this complicated, the second metadata, say the frequency data to ascertain that the plane went south. But we also know that the plane was flown very aggressively with a sort of indications of sophistication. Is it possible that somebody was sophisticated enough not only to take the plane, not only to outwit air traffic control, but to maybe tamper with this data?
Is it possible?
And this is where I separate from everyone else, and people start to say maybe Jeff should go on a conspiracy theory episode. Because I said, I asked myself, is it possible that there's a mechanism or a way that we can identify that it might be possible to alter this data so that it makes it look like the plane went south when it actually went north? So you're basically making a trail of electronic breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also possible that it would be that there was actually something wrong with the plane? Right? I mean, that
like accidental.
Yeah. That the pilot was trying to struggle with having issues with the plane.
Right. So a lot of people wondered, could it have been like an actual just innocent emergency? Maybe the lithium-ion batteries in the cargo hold caught fire. There was an emergency. Things were going wrong. Yeah. Smoke in the cockpit, whatever. And this all sort of unfolded like accidentally. In which case, the data couldn't have been tampered with. The plane really did go south. It flew south, and then it ended up in the southern Indian Ocean. It spirals in, and it lands in the ocean, and we know where it is.
Right.
And that's I mean, it doesn't really explain all of these turns and the acceleration, or there's no emergency call, and so it's hard to reconcile really all of these turns, frankly, with a situation where the plane is out of control or something. But what really puts that one in the ground for me is that if the plane flew south and the data was not corrupted, we then know where it went. It landed in the ocean in a very specific area and sank. And we know where it sank. And they went and they looked and they searched the seabed, and it's not there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because they actually have they can establish like a margin of error of where the plane went, and the plane is nowhere remotely in that area.
Yeah, I mean, they've searched, tens of thousands of
square miles
of ocean and have not found it.
Yeah. All right, we've got more with Jeff Wise, aviation journalist and expert on MH370, coming up in just a minute. But first of all, are you dealing with your finances right now and you don't know where to put your money because everything's out of control and up in the air? Let me suggest Constitution Wealth. It's a group of conservative financial managers that understand that even investing has become a battleground, and conservatives are losing. Most conservative portfolios are currently funding the very morals and evils that we fight against every day, but you don't have to do it that way. It's time to hit back. No more companies shoving woke materials down your throat, especially when you're investing. You want to invest in things you believe in. Aiming to empower American patriots through wealth management services like investing, estate planning, tax planning, charitable giving. That's what Constitution Wealth does. Financial decisions should be influenced by personal convictions, passions, values. Constitution Wealth will support aligning your values with your financials because they understand that you can greatly increase your portfolio when you invest using your core values, not just numbers. They respect liberty and freedom and believe in helping people fulfill their God-given potential. Constitution Wealth is looking for like-minded people ready to invest and potentially change the financial landscape. Book a free consultation today at constitutionwealth.com/Pat. That's constitutionwealth.com/Pat.
Pat Gray, Unleashed.
All right, so Jeff, we've established that neither the pilot nor the co-pilot had any kind of signs that psychologically they were suicidal. We've established that by friends and family and the company, correct?
I think that there are some people who disagree with that.
Okay.
There was one big article in the Atlantic that the author said that he went to Malaysia and he talked to unnamed sources who said that he was in a troubled marriage and financial problems and yada yada. it's, ultimately you don't know. And I at the time I talked to a psychologist who works with suicide, and I said to her, like, this seems like a really strange way to commit suicide. Like,
sure
are there
does.
cases where people would do something really, really elaborate? I mean, because you're thinking if you're ready to kill yourself, you're probably depressed, like not super motivated, not really in a mood to get into the real complicated things for no purpose except to like be dead.
And you don't necessarily want to take 238 other people with you, right? I mean, that's horrendous.
That seems weird.
Yeah.
You would have to be. I mean, there have been a handful of other cases where people have done this, not in such a complicated way. But so people, it's not completely unknown. And the suicide psychologist that I talked to said, listen, ultimately the human brain is unknowable. People do things and we don't really know why.
Right.
So you can't rule it out. But I think it is worth noting that other cases where this has happened, the perpetrators have been troubled. They've had either financial problems or mental problems. Their career was in jeopardy. Their marriage was in jeopardy, et cetera. So something like this is incomprehensible, but if you see somebody that's troubled, there are red flags.
So,
which there are no public signs of this. His friends and family, his Facebook posts, things like that. I mean, people got really worked up over what to me seemed like minor things. Like there was some pretty girl on Instagram that he was like giving her little heart comments and stuff. I mean, he's like seemed like a horny middle-aged dude. I don't. Right.
Right. Okay. So, see if you can put this to bed for us here. There was a theory for a while that perhaps everyone on board, including the pilots, were incapacitated by an oxygen deficiency, and it was speculated that that autopilot would have taken over until it ran out of fuel. And my simple mind is thinking, okay, then wouldn't autopilot keep going toward China? Why was that theory even considered after considering all what it did, doubling back and climbing?
Yeah, that's one of the main objections to that theory. The other is, again, like, how did this box mysteriously get turned off and then back on again if everyone was incapacitated? That's not, the box isn't going to turn itself back on. Also, again, if this is an accident, how come the turn back happened 6 seconds after the last waypoint? That seems like very specific timing, and very, it really calls to mind Air France 447, where a plane, is in between air traffic controls and isn't noticed.
Okay, so if it's not the pilot, then I'm sure we've looked into the other souls on the plane that, anyone else could have pulled this off.
Like a hijack possibility.
Yeah.
So how could it have been a hijack? So imagine that somebody, so as we've been talking about earlier, it turns out that anybody, as long as they're not noticed, but like there's no physical bar to, going up to the first class lavatory, pulling back some carpet, opening a hatch, going down in there, flipping the circuits, and you are in possession now of the computers that run the plane. This is what's called a fly-by-wire aircraft. And so unlike an older Cessna or something in which the controls, the yoke is physically connected to push rods and cables that physically move the control surfaces like the aileron and the rudder. In this plane, everything is controlled by electronics. Right. Computers send signals to actuators and they move the thing. And so theoretically, if you have physical possession of the box that's sending the signals to those control surfaces, I can't give you a specific mechanism, but presumably, if you were smart enough, you would be able to control those control surfaces. And so the question is, like, could somebody I think a problem that people have with this idea is that it requires an almost superhuman level of sophistication.
Now, well, there was a theory from a French journalist that shared the Netflix documentary with you, and her thought, of course, was that we did it. The United States shot down this plane because there was something on it that we didn't want to get to China.
Is that associated with the mysterious 200-pound load? Are those two hand in hand, those theories?
I think they're connected, aren't they? Are they, Jeff, connected there?
You can connect them. There's aspects of this case that are strange, and if you put enough strange things together, it starts to seem suspicious. I don't know if they really have explanatory power per se. It's one thing, to say, like, my neighbor is a shifty looking character and somebody knocked down my mailbox, and like my shifty neighbor seems like just the sort of person who would do that. That's not evidence that your neighbor, hit your mailbox.
Right.
And similarly, like, there was some mysterious cargo in the hold that might have somehow been related to somebody's motive.
Yeah. Here's the sentence says an engineer whose wife and 2 children were on the plane said that the French investigators had found a mysterious 200-pound load that was added to the flight list after takeoff.
Right. So you've got like a hearsay piece of evidence about a thing of dubious relevance. Like no matter what. So I feel people love to talk about motive, and I get it. It's like it makes for a more satisfying story, but motive ultimately is not really relevant when you're trying to figure out what happened to the plane. Like what I'm more interested in is like how can we physically explain the evidence that we have?
Right.
Like, okay, somebody was motivated to do something. What did they do? What happened to this plane? And then once we can sort of narrow down the options of who the possible culprits are, or actually can figure out what happened, then we can sort of start to speculate about motive. Jeffrey Dahmer has like 14 boys buried in his cellar. It's like it's not a question of like what he did it. I mean, then you can say, only when you find that can you and people might say, oh, but Jeffrey Dahmer would never do something like that. Well, but apparently he did.
Right.
Because the bodies are there.
Regardless of why he did it, he did it. Yeah.
Right. And so yes, a lot of people are like, well, the Americans just seem like exactly the kind of people who would do something like that.
Right.
And the Americans, have their fingers in everything, and they can read a license plate off a car, and so they're nefarious. Motive, opportunity, motive. It's like they're bad people who have the means. So therefore, QED.
Appreciate it.
It's not very satisfying. It's not really helpful to talk about suspects. Is motive first.
Right. Can you, Jeff? Do you have time to stick around with us for a few minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
We've got to get to Malaysian Flight 17 too, which throws another little element into this because there's another Malaysian flight. This one shot down over Ukraine by the Russians. So then people are like, well, maybe that happened to Malaysian Flight 370 as well. So we'll get into that, get Jeff's thoughts on that, and find out ultimately what he does think happened here. And, get your thoughts. 888-900-3393. More Pat Gray Unleashed coming up.
Pat Gray Unleashed.
Pat Gray is here on the Blaze Radio Network.
All right, we're going to delve back into the Malaysian Flight 370 mystery with our guest Jeff Wise coming up here in a minute. First of all, let me tell you about real estate agents I trust because, some things are better left to the experts. There are some things you can do on your own, like I'm going to put my old couch up on eBay. That's fine, do that. But if you're putting your old house up on eBay, that's probably not the way to go. For sale by owner. You can try that if you want. Or you could get an expert who can help you make all the really important decisions along the way. Like, do you remodel? Is it going to be worth the investment, to change countertops and remodel bathrooms and all of that? We're going through that right now. And according to our realtor, it is important to make those changes. So you need somebody who's with these buyers all the time and they know what they're looking for. That's Real Estate Agents I Trust. This is the company Glenn started because he had such a bad experience back east with realtors. Real Estate Agents I Trust. Only the best in your area. realestateagentsitrust.com.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
All right. It's been almost 10 years now since Malaysian Flight 370 went down. And we still don't know the definitive answer as to why, but we have aviation journalist Jeff Wise on, who has been investigating this for a good long time and is an expert on the flight. Also has a podcast coming up soon on the subject. Episode 1 is How to Approach an Unsolved Mystery. That's Deep Dive MH370. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's already up, the pilot episode there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So, Jeff, what happened like a few months later? I think MH370 went down in March, right? Was it March 8th?
Yep.
And then in July of that year, another Malaysian flight goes down. This one is shot down by the Russians over Ukraine. And then people started making connections there between the two, thinking, well, maybe that's what happened to Malaysian 370, just not necessarily the Russians, but somebody else shot it down.
Not really. Actually, for a long time, everyone very quickly assumed that it had to be a mistake.
Oh.
No, I though didn't because remember I had said that I had started to wonder if this box was turned on because somebody wanted to leave a trail of electronic breadcrumbs and took the plane north rather than south, then that would mean that the plane actually went to Kazakhstan. And actually wound up pretty close to a piece of Russian territory that the Kazakhs leased to Russia, which they use to launch all their rockets into space. And for a long time, they were actually launching Americans into space because we didn't have a space program.
We were hitchhiking.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so if that was my sort of the only explanation. So I said, look, if this was tampered with, then you're not going to find the plane on the seabed. Of course, the seabed search hadn't even started at that point. And it sounded pretty crazy to people, and people got mad at me for suggesting this, but the idea was that maybe Russians took this plane. And I remember I said that you would have to be insanely sophisticated to pull this off. But it turns out that the things that you would have to do to this plane are things that people in the field of electronic warfare do all the time in terms of air defense. You send out a drone and it's sending out a signal that confuses the air defense. That's basically what this idea is about. And so I had already started to hire people. I had hired researchers in Russia and Ukraine to start to look into the 3 Russian passengers on board the plane, 2 of which were sitting right under the satellite data unit. And one of which was sitting near the hatch to the electronics compartment. So I had hired investigators to look into this. And then on the morning of July 17th, I got a telephone call from a booker at CNN. Said, "Hey, did you hear about the Malaysian Airlines 777 in Ukraine?" And I was like, "You mean in Malaysia?" Because I was already thinking about Ukraine. And they were like, "No, it was a different Malaysian Airlines 777." And I was like, that is not a coincidence. I mean, Malaysian Airlines 777 connected to Ukraine. I mean, because all this, the Russia was in the process of annexing Crimea at this point. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's the end of the story. Clearly these things are related. But I wound up going on CNN and looking at this footage, and I didn't want to seem crazy at the time. And I didn't have any real evidence. And I hadn't really started to develop my thinking about it at this point. So everyone's like, oh, this is clearly just a weird coincidence. And I'm like, yeah, it looks like a coincidence. It wasn't until, and so what happened was this guy named Igor Strelkin, who was basically an officer of the GRU, the Russian military intelligence. And he put out a blog post saying, hey, we shot down this Ukrainian military plane. Hey, hooray for us. And everyone was like, oh, no, you didn't, because it wasn't a Ukrainian military plane. It was really a Malaysian Airlines 777. And so they thought that was a mistake. Who would intentionally make a mistake like that? Well, the kind of person who would make an intentional mistake like that is Russian military intelligence, because they're constantly, engaged in what we call hybrid warfare, right? They're constantly putting out misinformation. And so it wasn't until more like a year later that this group called Bellingcat, based in the UK, but really involving volunteers all around the world, they put together this data that they found on social media, using this technique that they'd started using in Syria. It's now very common, OSINT, open source intelligence. It's really common now, but at the time was really groundbreaking. And they were able to show that, no, this wasn't a mistake by some untrained militiamen who happened somehow to get their hands on a captured, Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile system. No, this was actually an operation run by the GRU, the same military organization that employed Igor Girkin. Igor Girkin, parenthetically, last week got arrested by the Russians because he was too closely connected to Prigozhin. So it's all a big mess. But the Russians are like definitely involved. The military intelligence shot down MH17. Like, we know that now. It really at the time nobody could believe it.
Wow. And why? So, but what is the motivation to shoot down the Malaysian plane in Ukraine? Why would they do that?
Why? Why did they do that? Exactly. This is a case what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
You know what happened, and you know who did it. You don't know why.
Right.
You can't start with motive.
Okay.
People do things, and especially, in the context of one of the aspects of hybrid warfare, when you're, and this is like a standard, this is not a new invention. People have been trying to mess with each other's heads since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. You don't just defeat your enemy with swords and cannons. You convince them that they're going to lose. Military theorists have been talking about this forever. And so part of the effort of confusion is like, if your enemy doesn't know what's happening or why, that's good. So the whole thing, one thing that did result from MH17 getting shot down is that the airspace over Ukraine was closed. The Ukrainians stopped using attack aircraft, which had been very successful. It kind of was militarily very significant for the Russians because they were losing the civil war that was unfolding in the Donbass at that time.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, so do you believe the theory of the three Russians being involved in MH370 then?
I think this is a really important point to make, which is that the goal is not to believe. The goal is to try to understand what data can be, what data is useful, what data is plausible, and try to find out what stories are comport with that evidence.
We want to believe, Jeff. We want to believe.
I know. We all do. And listen, so basically the point that I try to make is like there's two theories that have any relation whatsoever to the data that we have at hand. One is that the pilot did it, and one is that the Russians took it. Both of them have problems. Mm-hmm. And I personally feel that the pilot one has more problems than the Russian one.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
And you don't concern yourself with why they did it, right? You just
I have a whole chapter in my book explaining the sort of geopolitical context.
Okay.
And I will say this, that when I started to suspect the Russians, I got kind of terrified because the implication was that the Russians were engaged in a very sophisticated and very aggressive and very ruthless attack.
Yeah.
Aimed at like we don't know what exactly, but sort of vaguely against the West. At the time, the world was condemning the Russian annexation of Crimea. Russia was engaged in basically the first military invasion since World War II of a neighboring European country. I think Serbia. That might be wrong, but anyway, the point is. There was a war, a sort of a war had started. The West tended to think of it as a localized conflict involving Ukraine and Russia, but I think Russia saw it as a worldwide conflict. It needed to push back NATO. Mm-hmm. To Russia, the Ukraine was a red line.
And we kind of see that now.
Yes, we do.
So basically, the point I was making was like, I got very afraid that if MH370 was carried out by the people I thought might have carried it out, then that meant that all this bad stuff was going to happen. And all that bad stuff did happen.
Yeah.
Like Russia really did engage in a sophisticated and aggressive and ruthless campaign, multidimensional. It involved assassinating dissidents. It involved subverting elections and getting involved in all kinds of shenanigans, and sometimes in a very sophisticated way. There's an amazing documentary that came out about how the Russians carried out this doping scandal with the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And they basically figured out a way to tamper with these Swiss-made urine collection bottles that the Swiss are 100% convinced were untamperable with. You cannot tamper with them. And all the right-thinking people were like, it's impossible to tamper with it. And again, to me, it was like all these people who are saying, oh, it's impossible to tamper with this data. I'm like, you can't conceive of it because you think you're the smartest player. You can't conceive that your enemy is smarter than you. But that's what electronic warfare and that's what espionage is all about. It's about being smarter than the other guys. And I'll tell you, it's easy to think, oh, the Russians are drunk, their equipment is crap. Russians can carry out very, very sophisticated things. They were the ones who got to put a man in orbit for the first time, and don't minimize them. They're capable of doing very, very sophisticated things. One of the most dangerous things you can do in a conflict situation is underestimate your enemy.
I will say this though about the Russians: they paid dearly for the drugging scam.
Did they?
Oh yeah, they had to, instead of being called Russian athletes, they were called athletes from the Russian Federation.
Ouch!
Yeah,
That'll
that
teach
hurt.
you.
And they had to do a different colored flag. So that taught them a severe lesson, I think, right there.
Yeah, it did. Jeff, I really dig the Russian theory. I do. My only hang-up there really is if they wanted to show this as an attack on the West and look at what we can do, why would they go after an Asian-based plane where, like 60% of the passengers are from China? I mean, that's kind of my only hang-up on that theory there. Again,
that's a great objection. And as I've said, like each theory has its weaknesses.
Yeah.
I do have an explanation. I do have a reason for why this particular plane was targeted, which is that if you think of it in terms of like information security or computer security, like basically what I'm proposing is this was hacked, that they found a vulnerability and they exploited it. And if you find a vulnerability, it might not apply to all machines, right? Like if you find a weakness in an iPhone, it might not apply to, a different manufacturer's phone. And so I found a specific vulnerability that existed with MH370. I could be proven wrong if someone steps forward and says, no, this part of it you're misinterpreting. But MH370 had about 5 or 6 characteristics that, because it had all of them, and very few planes do, it was vulnerable to like this kind of vanishing, where it looks like it's going into the deep ocean where nobody can see it. There's no radar coverage, no satellite is looking at it, and it's actually going north. Because remember, until the debris started turning up, the only evidence we had for this plane where it went was electronic and math.
Right.
And then I just want to quickly say that, the pieces of debris started washing up in the Indian Ocean, and the investigators got really excited because they're like, there's barnacles on these. Barnacles grow like trees. They have like rings on a tree. So you can tell how long it's been in the water and where it came from. So they're like, great, we're going to use these barnacles to tell us where the plane crashed, and then we're going to find the plane. Well, they looked at the barnacles. The barnacles had only been in the water for a month.
Oh wow!
And the debris had been the plane had been missing for 15 months.
Right.
Oh wow! Oh my gosh!
The plot thickens. Have we?
That's bizarre.
Right.
Does that bodes well to your theory, though?
It does.
So in the 10 years that the plane has been missing now, has there been any indication in any form whatsoever of any individuals from the plane or the plane itself being in Russian-held territory? Has there been any kind of indication, any rumors, anything like that?
We got any satellite footage of the plane in Kazakhstan?
No, we don't. If and I the idea is that like this was a super sophisticated operation, but like there's humans, and like did they leave a trace that you could find later? And I spent a lot of time investigating. I started to look at the Russian passengers, and then it got really hard to do research in Russia. It got kind of dangerous. He's a fascinating guy. He's in my book. I won't bore you right now, but he was a kind of like real MacGyver kind of character. His hobby was diving underneath the frozen ice of Lake Baikal in the winter.
There's a lot of us like that.
Yeah, I do that too.
He's a wild.
A lot of that.
He was a real interesting character, but I kind of lost track of him. There were these two Ukrainian men who were Soviet army veterans who were sitting underneath the satellite data unit. And they supposedly worked for this furniture company, but nothing about it really. It doesn't really add up. Like why they were on this particular flight. It's sort of I don't really have anything definitive, frankly, but I'm continuing to work on it, and I don't know if I'll send or not.
Okay, so what's the name of your book?
The book is The Taking of MH370.
The Taking
of MH370.
Which kind of gives you a clue as to where you headed.
Well, I do think that it was taken. I mean, whether it was taken by the pilot or by somebody else, Russians, for instance, it was taken. And I think that this idea that it was shot down by the Americans, that there was a fire on board or stuff. I think we can put those things aside. There's been a lot of documentaries made over the last 10 years, and I think that the tendency that the producers tend to follow is, there's 13 different conspiracy theories. Let's talk about them all. Let's give them equal weight. And I really think we should move beyond that.
Right.
I think I think we can assess what's valuable evidence and what's not.
I mean, this is one of the most, expensive searches in history, right? I mean, we've spent
lengthy
hundreds of millions of dollars and man hours and technology to find this plane, and we've come up with a wing part with barnacles that are on it for a month. Right. I know we found some other debris as well that washed up on shore. The one metal detector guy found quite a few items from the plane. At least they claim that it's from the plane, but it's really strange that we've spent all this time and money on, and we have not found anything. I mean, we found a couple of ships that crashed. That's it.
It's frustrating to me because, like I said, back before they even started to look for MH370, I said that look, there's a vulnerability that exists with this plane that could explain how it might not have gone south. So if you don't find it in the south, you just consider this other possibility.
Right.
And the authorities, who I think in every other respect have done a remarkable job. They carried out an incredibly complex and demanding task in searching an area the size of Great Britain, 3 miles deep, with underwater canyons and mountains and everything. They're incredible, very impressive. But they have refused ever to entertain the possibility that this data could have been tampered with. Mm-hmm. They refuse to. They're like, it has to be there, and it's like, well, how could it possibly be there? You searched the area where you said it had to have gone, and it's not there. Like, what is your explanation? And I feel like it's too important. Even if I'm completely wrong in my theory,
to not do
look,
that.
This is a plane with 239 people aboard that vanished into thin air. Mm-hmm. That it's a hole in our understanding of airplanes.
Yeah.
And so you can't really get on a plane and say to yourself with 100% certainty that you're not going to vanish, because we don't know what happened to this one.
Right. Fascinating stuff. Jeff, thanks for all the hard work and research you've done on this. Fascinating stuff. We'll be watching out for in fact, the pilot episode of your podcast is already available. Where can people find that?
They can find that on the Apple Podcasts.
Okay.
Just search for Deep Dive MH370.
All right.
I still want to know why.
That's my point.
I want to know
this is
why.
fascinating, Jeff. Thank you so much, man.
This is really good.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Yeah, you're not supposed to worry about the why.
I know.
Doesn't matter. So shut up about the why, would you? You're really pissing me off. All right, let me take a minute and ask you what would happen if all of a sudden the global medication supply chain of antibiotics just dried up. It's just gone.
Might not be just the antibiotics.
Right. It could be.
There's a shortage going on right now as we speak.
And so what do? You want to be prepared. And you want to be prepared with the things that you can prepare yourself for, like antibiotics. They're available from the Jace case. So Jace Medical is a great way to get yourself prepared for the worst that could happen. Interruptions in the supply chain, or who knows, China cuts us off. You don't know, but you want to be prepared. It's a pack of 5 different courses of antibiotics that you can use to treat all kinds of bacterial illnesses. Urinary tract infections, respiratory infections, sinusitis, all kinds of stuff. Go to jacemedical.com, enter the promo code PAT at checkout. That's promo code PAT at jasemedical.com.
Pat Gray Unleashed. We'll be right back after this.
So, what do you think about Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 now?
I think we've decided.
How do you like it now? I don't. I still don't like it.
I don't know.
We don't know what
right.
happened.
I mean, it's a lot of people that are missing.
Fascinating though. Yes, 239.
I feel for
gone.
the families, man.
It was 239 with that flight, and then the Malaysian flight that was shot down over Ukraine was another 298 people. Jeez.
Yeah,
rough few months.
I know it's circumstantial, but the 3 Russians sitting next to those important areas of the plane for
Fascinating.
electronics.
He makes a great case for
Pretty
that.
compelling.
It sure is.
And maybe Russia didn't think of what country it was flying to. Maybe they wanted to pick on a country that is too small to respond if there were fingerprints left by the Russians somehow.
I don't know. Maybe.
It's very compelling, that theory.
Yep. It's interesting to say the least.
Where's the plane, though, man?
Yeah, I don't know.
If they take it, then where does it go?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I want to know. I mean, do we have
Okay, so I just got hollered at for saying I wanted to know why. How come you're not hollering at him? Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't matter why, Keith.
It doesn't matter why.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
It doesn't matter.
Jeffy had a story last week. They found the killer there in New York City. These internet sleuths used Google Earth and found him standing on the street corner.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We can't find a plane in the middle of Kazakhstan.
Well, that's specific. You got to be looking. That's like looking through a straw. You heard him.
Yeah. You heard him. You have to know where it is, so you can go looking for it.
You can't just,
I guess.
You can't just look at the Earth and go, "Oh, look, there's a plane on it."
I see. I'm looking forward to Jeff Wise, the book and the podcast.
Maybe,
man.
I'm going to read the book.
I do too, and I'm fascinated. Maybe everyone listening to the show should just hop on Google Earth and
find the plane.
Scan Kazakhstan and find the plane,
and send a DM to Jeffy when you find it.
But it's probably it's probably not. It doesn't even exist now, right? I mean, they're throwing pieces in the ocean to throw people off,
right? And it's been there for a month now.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years.
That barnacle stuff.
That was fascinating.
That was awesome.
I've never heard that before.
I had not either, because I watched the one documentary, the National Geographic one that talks about, I think it's Oceans Away or something like that. And they have this technology where they just take the ocean. They move the ocean. Is what they do.
That's cool.
They just pick the water up and they move it out of the way. It's pretty fascinating.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
We're always dragged over the coals for thinking that something's up with our government, aren't we? And yet, there's always reason to think something's up with our government. The other day, when the 911 call, they've got a list of all the 911 calls going into the Martha's Vineyard emergency area, and it says on all of them except one what the call was.
Yeah, look at this. We got a blank spot here.
Now, I'm sure that's just they forgot to fill in the particular call.
That's reported to be
from the Obamas.
The Obama.
That's the time it happened,
call.
Apparently, and there's nothing listed.
Wow. Could you be more obvious?
Is that the way they report drownings at the Martha's Vineyard 911 call center?
All drownings are just left empty.
Right.
Prop check is the first one. Minor MVA, motor vehicle accident, I would assume. Then a motor vehicle accident, property damage, medical emergency, and then the Obama call. Nothing. Then you've got the boat accident call, the prop check, the medical emergency, the motor vehicle erratic operator. You got the stolen motor vehicle. All the rest are filled in with what the deal is, not the Obama's call about the chef who drowned.
But almost as if somebody were to have gone back in.
No, it's almost like that. Yeah.
But you're right, Jeffy. What is going on Martha's Vineyard? I mean, that's like
a lot of stuff.
15, 20 incidents there over the course of, 7 hours?
Jeez.
So, wow. I thought when you said, what was the line you said? Our government maybe up to something? What is it you just said? I thought you were going with Sam Bankman-Fried having the finance charge dropped in his case there for...
Yeah, nothing to see here.
No.
Move
Democrat Party, big fundraiser. We're going to make sure that's not an issue.
Fortunately, though, they've brought more charges against Donald Trump, which we've all been clamoring for.
And I'll tell you something else. not only Donald Trump, but we're going to bring charges against one of the janitors at Mar-a-Lago, too. Okay?
Good, that bastard. I've hated that janitor since I can't tell you when.
Wait, what happened? Tell us about this is trauma we weren't aware of.
Well, he pissed me off.
Yeah.
I mean, he was sticking his mop where it didn't belong.
Whoa.
I told him.
Wow. Okay.
It might be the same guy.
What are they charging the guy? What are they charging him with?
I don't know the actual charge, but they claim that he deleted footage. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the premises where the files were
probably
kept.
at the direction of Trump.
Yes.
They're saying,
jeez, man,
it's
let
unbelievable.
It certainly is.
I can't take it. Oh, they're just feeding the beast. I mean, they're just making him more popular.
They just drive everybody to him.
Every indictment is what? Another 10 electoral votes?
Probably.
Seriously.
And another 10 percentage points on his lead over DeSantis and everybody else.
If they know that they're already going to beat him.
It's almost like that.
Seriously, a case can be made that, they made the mistake in 2016 of saying that's who they wanted to be the nominee, but now they know how to count votes.
Yeah. Almost as if something
it's as if it's on purpose. We had a lot going on in Washington D.C. again yesterday. Have you seen the Nancy Mace video at the National Prayer Breakfast?
We got to see that.
Okay, so she's at the National Prayer Breakfast.
This is embarrassing.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace about to give her speech, and then this happens.
Another year, another standing room only event. And when I woke up this morning at 7, I was getting picked up at 7:45. Patrick, my fiance, tried to pull me by my waist over this morning in bed. And I was like, no, baby, we don't got time for that this morning. I got to get to the prayer breakfast and I got to be on time. And a little TMI. But he can wait. I'll see him later tonight. But I was here early.
Just keep on digging that hole.
Nance. The time to think that was too much information is before you gave it all. That was the time.
That was the time?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Especially when you're talking about a prayer breakfast and you're just, okay, so your fiance, you're not married to him yet.
Right.
He wants some action.
And take a little business.
Before you go to the prayer breakfast.
He pulled her over in bed.
Yeah.
By the way.
Maybe that's a story you don't tell. At the prayer breakfast.
Or at all.
Why?
Or at all.
I mean,
Ever.
Wow. No.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Gotta go praise the Lord.
How crazy is that? That's just weird.
Yeah.
That is really weird. All right, we're going to get to the Fat Five in
all right, cool. I got
just a second. In just a second. Hang on there, Jeffy. He's so anxious, man. He can't wait to get to the Fat Five.
I've got a...
First, I got to tell you about preborn because we have been... we've been very blessed in that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And so that was exactly the motivation everybody needed to try to protect life in their states. Well, not everybody, but states like Texas and other conservative states have tried to protect their unborn. That's not the case everywhere. And so that's why preborn continues to exist, because they're still desperately needed. And what they do is show expectant mothers an ultrasound of their baby to show them that is an actual human baby inside of you. They hear the heartbeat, they see the baby, and then they're twice as likely to choose life afterwards. That costs $28 to show the mother the ultrasound. $28. If you can do that, that'd be great. If you can do 5, that's $144. That shows 5 women, 5 ultrasounds. One ultrasound is just $28 to save a life. Just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby if you can help. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Pat.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
Oh, we also have Dianne Feinstein.
Are you cutting me off again?
Yeah, just a second.
Is that what's happening right now?
Hang on, because Dianne Feinstein.
Every day we get at least one example. Some days this week, multiple examples of Congress being way too old to be in their positions.
Yep.
Yes.
And yesterday was the most.
Just another
recent.
example.
I mean, seriously, we've had Joe Biden. We have every day.
Yeah, don't forget that. Here's just a couple instances of him, actually.
I'm honored to oversee the greatest fighting force, literally, not figuratively, in the history of the world, and that's not hyperbole.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, good. It's not hyperbole. I thought it was.
Yeah.
Please clap.
And I might add, the most diverse fighting force in the history of the world.
It's the most diverse fighting force fighting. The vice of the fight force. The fight.
Okay.
It's the fight force of the vice.
And they're diverse, too.
And it's diverse. And I'm pissed off about that. Wait, why are you angry over
Because
I haven't had my meds today.
Because I want you to know that, there's trans people in the fighting vice?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
It's not hyperbole.
Not hyperbole.
Man, you're trying too hard, man.
We have another Joe Biden before we get to Dianne Feinstein from yesterday. I sent it in. I hope he has it, of talking about, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to paint my roof white.
Are you?
I'm going to paint my house.
All right.
In fact, I'm just going to paint
At his
everything
suggestion?
white. Yes.
Well, it's not going to alleviate the heat problem right now.
What?
We also have a number of programs to do everything from allow people to have the ability to get help to literally paint their roofs white, to change their windows and doors and get tax credits for doing it, so heat doesn't, so air conditioning doesn't escape. To be able, there's a whole bunch of programs that are out there that as we get through the heat wave, that as we get by this worst part, and we're able to invest in the communities to keep it from happening as badly next time it occurs.
That's almost as bad as maps.
So all we have to do is paint our roof white.
Yeah.
And then there won't be heat waves like this anymore.
Climate change.
Okay, good.
At the Combating Climate Change Conference. That's good stuff right there.
I can't believe these people. And I can't believe people believe these people. It is unbelievable to me.
It sure is.
How does it happen where you listen to that BS and you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. I need to paint my roof white so we don't have climate change anymore.
And you can sign up to get funding from them for that.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How stupid do you have to be to buy into this stuff?
I saw a thing where, Fetterman stopped talking to people. Like, no one is interacting with him.
We haven't heard anything about him in a while.
So we got John Fetterman, inability to speak. Mm-hmm. We got Joe Biden every day.
Yep, can't speak.
We had Mitch
McConnell had a stroke in front of the world.
Yeah, and we don't even know what the deal was because apparently they didn't take him to the hospital. He didn't see a doctor.
He made a joke of it, right? They asked him about it.
It's not a joke.
The president called.
It's not funny.
I told the president I've been sandbagged.
Yeah, so they're saying they think it was a TIA.
Which is what?
Transient attack. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a birtation. Remember the birtation from the from the reporter? Mm-hmm. So if it's just that seems to be temporary.
Fine.
Okay, but tell us.
But he's had a few birtations.
Yeah, falling and breaking stuff.
And there was a report where he was in the Netherlands, I think, and he fell.
In the Netherlands?
He fell.
And we don't
literally
have
fell.
Footage of it?
It didn't happen. It didn't happen. How are we having a U.S. senator? I mean, the
head of the Republican Party in the
Senate. He falls while meeting a world leader. Nothing.
Yeah. Apparently. So you're talking about McConnell?
Mitch McConnell?
Yes.
Yeah. McConnell hurt himself quite badly, and they think he might have had a concussion.
That was at the restaurant.
Yeah. So now we have
that was at the restaurant, which he did hurt himself really bad.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he was put into his
6
wife
weeks.
didn't even want him to come home after that. They sent him to a rehab center.
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame her for not wanting him
I
home.
know.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only so much of turtles you can take.
Right.
So
this is another time.
So we got the stairway fall. We've got the face first on the plane.
Yeah,
we now have the Netherlands thing.
I think it was
we have
another
the
one.
stroke out.
Right.
And yesterday we had the illustrious Senator Dianne Feinstein. And so
this is good though.
It comes to her.
She's cognizant here.
She's.
I will say she looks pretty good here.
She's 90.
Yeah.
Going on much older.
Like 1,000.
Yeah. So she's just supposed to say aye. That's all she has to do is vote here. And after she starts trying to give a speech, her staff has to jump in here.
They wheel her in for I. And she starts
Senator Feinstein.
Say aye. Pardon me? Aye. Yeah.
Just say
I would like to support a yes vote on this. It provides $823 billion. That's an increase of $26 billion for the Department of Defense.
Yeah, we know,
and
Diane.
it funds priorities submitted.
Yeah, just say aye.
Just say aye.
Just
Look at that.
aye.
Thank you.
Holy cow. Oh my gosh. So her aides have to stop her and tell her, just say aye. Okay, this isn't the time for the speech. Okay, just say aye.
You don't
Just
need
say
to.
yes.
You don't need to read the file. We all know the file.
Wow. That's incredible. Again, we're an oligarchy, and
Okay, who put the file in front of Diane when we showed up? Who did that?
It's not going well. It's not going well.
Wow.
Like the only piece of paper she should have had a piece of paper, and this is this is all it should have said on it.
Aye.
Yeah, here you go. Did I spell this right, Jeffy? There.
You did.
There you go.
You did spell
That's
it.
all she needed in her hand.
That's it.
I mean, I would just put the letter I, man, on a piece of paper. Say that.
she's got aides on both sides of her telling her, shut up and say aye.
Yeah, throughout
Okay,
that entire
stop talking,
30
except for
seconds
aye.
of meandering,
Just say
you
aye.
hear them just nonstop to it.
Just say gay. Just say gay. No, wait. No. Say this. Florida won't let me say the word gay. Say that.
This is, and remember at the beginning of the week we had the clip from Stacey Plaskett, and she's reading it wrong, and her staffer, who obviously wrote it word for word, is mouthing it behind her, and then has to jump in and be like, whatever what the word was.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable!
Your government, the people that you elect aren't the people running your government from the top down.
You've got college interns running.
You've got interns. You've got whoever's typing into the teleprompter for Joe.
Right.
You've got George Soros.
Not good. Not good. All right, we do have the Fat Five.
Could be a little
however.
scary.
This is your chance to shine now, and you're going off on tangents. Here's the Fat Five with Jeffy.
Okay.
So, kind of a little mea culpa here. This isn't really part of the Fat Five, but I guess I'll make it part of the Fat Five. On Wednesday, I showed you the Barbie billboard.
That's cool.
In Dubai.
Right. Watch this.
And
watch her come off the...
okay.
Yep, here she goes.
Whoa.
It's kind of...
That's really cool.
That's very cool.
And we were like, okay, I didn't know we had that technology. Well, apparently...
It's kind of not real, but real.
Yeah.
It's not real, but real.
Huh? What do you mean?
It's not real, but real. It's a 3D video showing the giant Barbie walking out of the packaging. It's the CGI clip made from this company in
okay, so
in
if
Dubai.
you're driving by that...
Yeah, you don't see it.
You don't see it.
No.
I
It's
didn't
not
think
there.
we had technology like that.
We do, though. We have billboards in New York where animals come out of it all the time.
Do they, though?
Yeah, we've seen it.
I don't think I have.
Yes, you have.
I don't think so.
Yes, you have.
I don't know that I've seen it.
You have seen it.
We should have, and we were kind of confused that they would do that billboard in Dubai.
Yeah.
Scantily
Where
clad,
Barbie's not in a burqa, and you're okay with that?
The
Really?
company,
All
went
right.
and took the pictures of the Burj, and then they did the 3D stuff with the Barbie on the video.
So it's
and they
not
were all
real.
happy that it would
Look
be
at that.
trending.
Wouldn't that be
And
cool,
we got,
though?
It's got millions of views all around the world. But if you're at the Burj, you're not seeing that. Okay?
No.
It's just seeing it at the video. I
That's a
know.
bummer. That's a bummer. What about the alien technology we reverse engineered? Why don't we have that? Why can't
Thank
we do
you.
that? Should be able to by now.
Thank you.
Got a bunch of dead aliens laying around all over the place. And their technology that we reverse engineered.
Are we
Let's
supposed to be
use it.
using that?
Let's use it.
Are we supposed to be using that? So, Pat.
Yeah. Yes.
Eagles singer.
Don Henley?
Meisner.
Randy Meisner.
Dead.
No,
At
really?
the age of 77.
I don't think he's been with the Eagles for a while. But,
well, I mean, he's
Randy
the founding.
Meisner, yeah,
he's founding
one of the
member,
founding members.
Yeah, he's
I
really
didn't
been
know that.
struggling. Yeah,
How
he's
old
been
was he?
sick, 77.
What was he sick with?
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So, he had oxygen, couldn't walk. So. And remember, he got all
from the Eagles.
Yeah.
That's all these people from my childhood are starting to die, which means how far behind am I? How far behind? I hope a long way, but I don't know.
Wow, happy Friday thoughts from Pat
really
Gray
kind of
Unleashed.
depends.
Yeah.
It really kind of depends. He's been out of the limelight, though, because remember his wife killed herself by accident?
I don't remember that.
Oh,
really?
He had a big struggle. Yeah,
Randy Meisner's wife?
Yeah, I was reading about it this morning because I didn't know that I for some reason I don't remember it. It was back in 2016, 17, something like that.
All right.
They were having some kind of argument, and apparently they have had a few arguments in their marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were having some kind of argument, and she went in the bedroom, and there was a gun in the closet, and then there was some kind of item in the gun case. She picked up the gun case. That item slid down, pulled the trigger, and she died.
Oh,
the gun
how many
went
times
off,
has
and
that
she
happened?
I know.
If I had a nickel for every time that's happened in my life.
And the police are like,
"What?
Yep, that's a freak accident. She's dead." Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh!
Nothing to see here.
So they did not blame Randy Meisner.
No,
for
they
that.
did not. And I don't know if there was a blank space on the 911 call. Wow. I don't know.
Wow. All right.
It didn't happen on Martha's Vineyard, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. Whatever. And you haven't mentioned yet Kevin Spacey, his London trial, not guilty. All charges.
Yeah.
The second trial.
Didn't you call this?
So, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to stay up on this trial, reading as much as I could during the testimony. And the testimony that I read, that I got, I was, obviously not on the jury. He was not guilty. I mean, it was just unbelievable that this would even come to the courts. And the proof was definitely in his favor. And the jury thought so too. They came back,
not guilty.
Right, all charges, and that's the second. The Anthony Rapp case, the end of last year, not guilty.
His career's already been ruined.
I know.
So does he get that back?
Yeah,
I don't know.
A bad timing to be, have your name cleared if you're a Hollywood actor, considering there's a strike happening right now.
Right.
And, but I mean. Is he even part of that anymore? Did SAG-AFTRA give him the boot? Probably.
I bet they did.
I bet they did too.
Yeah.
So if I'm Amazon,
he lost every gig he had.
Yeah.
After these accusations.
So if I'm, say, Amazon Prime, I say, hey Kev, here's $100 million. Go
do something.
Make something for me.
Right.
And let it happen. I mean, now that would be a great time. Then just put your thumb up Netflix's rear end. I'm going to take a hike.
Yep.
Because they ruined his stuff on Netflix, I'll tell you that right now. Okay, so it's going to happen again here on the Fat Five. The Fête du Féline, the collaboration between Fancy Feast, not Fancy Feasts. Oh my God, you don't want that. You do not want that. In-house chef. They're going to have their International Cat Day with a 2-day celebration in Madison Square Park, where you're going to show up and be able to eat cat food for humans. So they did it last year, and it was such a success. So they're going to recreate some famous dishes every day. And you can sign up
from
to go.
cat food.
Yeah, you could sign up.
Why would you do that? Why? Why would you do that?
Because it's so good.
Okay.
Feces thrown all over the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and it stunk so bad.
You don't want that. That was my point. You don't want that. You don't want that. And I see where everybody's giving Jason Aldean a tough time because they claimed he bent the knee. There's 6 seconds taken out of the video now.
Yeah.
And
they were getting sued by BLM.
Well, they were saying that this video footage was edited due to third-party copyright clearance issues. Right. So it's only 6 seconds, and that's all they could find in that video, trying to take it down. I mean, I know that CMT so many people watch CMT. I mean, that is like the number one cable network in the world.
Yes.
I mean, this show has more people watching it every day than CMT wishes they had.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, easily. Mm-hmm. So I know that's a big deal to get pulled off CMT. But
oh well.
No. No.
Also, a little addendum to the Fat Five. Colorado just joined the Big 12.
No, it's official.
Well, not until next year, right?
Right. But it's official. They're going to join the Big 12. Yeah, it's too late for this year. We've got the schedules and things. But
we've
next
got the
year,
schedules.
Yeah, that's my boys.
We've got the
my boys in the Big 12. My homies in the Big 12.
Welcome to college football.
Wow.
So it's kind of exciting. It's kind of Colorado now. Not that they've been a massive prize lately, but
they might be.
They might be someday.
Might be, yeah.
With Deion Sanders,
Prime might have turned it around.
Did you see that they booted out 75 scholarship players?
Yeah.
It was either 73 or 75.
No, it was a lot.
And
it was a lot.
Had to go to the transfer portal to replenish his roster. 73, 75, something
and since
like that.
it's really difficult since you're not supposed to know who's in the transfer portal when you get players from the transfer portal, but I guess that's all through the wash.
Well, you're not supposed to know before they're in the portal.
And we'll get a first look at Deion Sanders' revamped Colorado Buffaloes. Their first game is at TCU.
Okay.
Their second game is at home against Nebraska. It's going to be interesting.
And that's just around the corner.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.